What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel as the preview show for Sunday's League Cup final against Rangers, and I'm delighted to be joined by Chris once again to look ahead to the game. Chris, welcome back. We have just come off the back of that trip to Zagreb. It was a 0-0 draw on the night, so before we turn our attention to the cup final and look ahead to that, I suppose just your summary of that game, and I suppose that the fallout from it, because there was plenty of that after full time.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me back on the channel, Paul. It's great to be back to preview the big game on Sunday. Reflecting on Tuesday, I think it's a sign of how far we've actually come in Europe when you take a point away from home when those have been very few and far between in all the years we've played in the Champions League, that you're left with such a feeling of frustration, disappointment, missed opportunities being branded around. But I look at the bigger picture. This is just my personal opinion, Paul. If you had said to any Celtic fan that through the first 6 games, based on the fixtures, that the only loss would come away to Borussia Dortmund, like assuming Zagreb had had their full strength team, I think a point would have been an excellent result. They were missing 5 or 6 very good players. They fielded a team arguably that we should have beaten. Our quality in the final third was very poor. We just lacked that cohesion in the final third. Just didn't make the right types of passes, and just I didn't think we were as efficient with our ball movement as we have been when we played really well this year. But that's going to happen, and you have no divine right to win any game in the Champions League, let alone away from home. I think I would agree that it was probably a missed opportunity, but I'm not getting carried away with myself. If you had also said that with 2 games to go, one at home against Young Boys, who are dead last in the Champions League this year, and if we win that game, albeit there's now a little more pressure on that fixture, I totally agree with that sentiment. I would have taken it. And to be on 9 points is absolutely tremendous. Tremendous. I said it the last time I was on the channel, Paul. We've been crying out for progression in Europe. If we win against Young Boys and we have 12 points and we're automatically into that group of 16 teams in the final 24, that is a huge step forward for the club. Huge. And I would have absolutely taken that before we started.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the context of the whole campaign so far is important. Do you think some of the fallout and the reaction to the game was a bit over the top? I don't know. It's hard to gauge, I suppose, because yes, taken in isolation, it is a game that we should have won. But I think this season's been so plain sailing so far. One big defeat, and the form has been exceptional. And maybe we started to think, well, if we can win this game in Zagreb and then beat Young Boys, you're actually getting towards the chance of maybe sneaking into the top 8. Do you think we maybe it's just part of that looking too far ahead and then not getting the points in that game, meaning people think we have missed a bigger opportunity than we otherwise might have?
I mean, Paul, we've taken 4 or less points in our last 2 Champions League campaigns. It's not for me to say that any fan's reaction is over the top, because everyone is entitled to their opinion. So I'm not going to say that anyone isn't entitled to feel like it was a missed opportunity, and that the furor around the lack of performance, etc., etc. It was, we should have took 3 points. They were a Conference League team. It's not for me to say that. I personally think, yes, it was a missed opportunity. But when I look at the bigger picture of where we were our first year under Ange, then last year under Brendan, where we finally won a Champions League game, and now you've played 6 games and you've only lost one, you really need to look at the big picture. And I'm certain that's what Brendan and the team are doing. And that's the way I look at it, is we have made a huge stride forward this year. And I said it, like I said, last time I was on, if we qualify, that is a huge, huge step forward. And that's what we've been crying out for. So I'm trying to look at the big picture. Yes, as a one-off, of course, there was a huge opportunity there. because if we're on 11 points and we win against Young Boys, we've got 14. And then you go into that Villa game and there's probably a percentage opportunity to make the top 8. But let's not get too carried away with ourselves. Like, we are in a fantastic position. It has been an outstanding season. And now we have a chance to win the first trophy up for grabs and really cement the first 3 months of the season.
Yeah, and that's a good link because the Champions League moves to the back burner now, and we look ahead to Sunday, the League Cup final against Rangers. Obviously, we've played them once already this season. We ran out comfortable, 3-0 winners. If you look at the recent form in this fixture, it's heavily stacked in our favour. We've only lost one of the last 13 derby meetings. There's been 9 wins for us and 3 draws in those other 12 games. That defeat, was the one at Ibrox under Ange after we just sealed the title. So we've been in terrific form in this fixture. Chris, how do you feel, just gut feel coming into this about how we're shaping up?
Well, if you'd asked me a month ago, I would have been ultra confident of a very comfortable cup final win. I think if you want to be a bit more objective, Rangers have certainly improved their performance over the last 4 or 5 games. They've beaten teams in the league you would expect them to beat. A couple of those games being at home, and they've had some heavy wins. But their performance against Spurs on Thursday was a very good performance. They pressed Spurs extremely well. In fact, it was almost like it was watching Ange's tactics, but Rangers were the ones, using them. But at the same time, if we turn up and we play our best, and if our top players play to their levels, we have more than enough to win the game. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's going to be a blowout, because even in recent times, if you look at the last 2 cup finals we've played Rangers, it was 1-0 with an Adamida 90th minute goal. The semi-final the year before, it was 1-0 with a Jota goal. And then in the League Cup final, it was 2-1 with 2 goals from Kyogo. So all of those games have been, and even the one we lost in the Scottish Cup semi-final under Ange, was 2-1 after extra time.
Yeah.
The games have all been close, irrespective of the form going into the game, the perception of both sets of supporters. It's a cup final. It's a one-off game. But I am confident that if we play the way we can, especially in the final third, I think that's where the two teams really differ. Is I feel like going forward, we can definitely hurt them a lot more than they can hurt us. They've definitely got some players that have rounded into some good form. Cherney's been playing very well for them. Igamandi's been playing really well. So it'll be very interesting to see whether or not Clement's previous tactics of where Rangers have almost kind of sat off us and given us the ball, and we've had the majority of the possession in all of the recent games, or will they actually try to press us? And if we get around that press, are we going to have the overlaps and the odd man situations in terms of numbers in the final third, where I think we could really hurt them, especially given Suter is almost definitely not going to make it. And if their back two is Balogun and Proper, that's something on paper, at least, that really favours us, Paul.
Yeah, I think in terms of the mentality, which we might come back to later on in the video, of this Celtic team, of these players turning up in these games, winning in the big moments, performing in the big moments, that's clear in the recent history of this fixture. I think when you go back to that game in September, remember Rangers did come out and press us in the first 8-10 minutes, and then we played through them and scored that goal. It was ruled out for offside with Kyogo. Do you think, given the way they approached the game against Spurs, and I know Spurs are in a bad moment right now, they're really sloppy, they look low in confidence, and Rangers were at home in a European game with the crowd behind them, but given how they approached that in terms of their aggression and how they got after Tottenham, and the fact that they did it at Celtic Park, but then eventually came unstuck, but then only took us 10 minutes to work it out and play through it, and then after that we dominated the game. Do you think they'll approach it like that, and do you think that would play into our hands on Sunday?
I do expect them to have a very fast start to the game, right? Because I think their tails are up, Paul. They've definitely been playing better of late, and it's kind of subsided a lot of the background noise that they've been experiencing from their own supporters. But the single biggest advantage that we have is I truly believe that we have the superior manager in the dugout.
Mm.
And even if Rangers do come out and press us aggressively, I'm very confident that Brendan can make the adjustments on the fly, like we did in the game at Parkhead. We got through that press. Obviously, Kyogo's goal was disallowed for offside in the build-up, but then we scored shortly thereafter, and then got another quick goal after that. So it's honestly doesn't concern me. I think either way, if they allow us to grow into the game, and we were to get the early goal, that's also been a definite secret to our success of late, as we have scored a lot of goals in the first 15, 20 minutes of these games. It's established a significant foothold in the game. And then the psychology starts to really come to pass. Like, there's often times where I look at that Rangers team in the last couple of years and they look beat before they've even taken the field, right?
Yeah.
Because they just know that we are the superior team. But based on what I just said previous in the last little segment there, Paul, all of the last three cup games have been extremely close, extremely tight games. I do not expect anything different, but I'm confident that even if they do press us, to your question, that we'll figure it out. But there's no doubt that based on where the two teams are now versus about a month ago, we're going to have to be at it on Sunday. I don't think we can afford to have a Hatate performance like he did on Tuesday. He was very, very poor, incredibly sloppy with the ball. Can't afford to have that. And equally, I didn't think Dyson had his best game. I mean, obviously, we know we were always going to get his pressing, but we need him to be getting to the byline and causing havoc, taking the blind side. And one of the biggest selection things I'm really keen to see is what does Clement do with Tavernier, right? I think if you ask any Rangers
Well, he's
fan,
really
even
smart, isn't he?
despite how well he played against Spurs, is Dyson has terrorized him for the last 2 years. And I think if Clement was to play Tavernier and a similar situation happens and Rangers lose the game, the finger pointing and the calls for Clement to be sacked, despite how well they've played in the last 4 weeks, will be massive. The pressure's all on Rangers. Like, so from that perspective, I feel good about the scenario we find ourselves going into the game.
I think regardless of how much anyone thinks Rangers have turned a corner with their recent form, the pressure on their manager is still absolutely monumental. They're still third. They're still sitting 11 points behind us in the league table. So that's still there, and obviously defeating this in this game would compound that. For us, Chris, on that big Hampden pitch, if we're at it and Rangers come at us, I think that could play into our hands, because if we can get in at their back four with the pace we've got up front, I think we can really do some damage. In terms of the team selection for us, which you've alluded to, there some of the selection headaches maybe on the other side for us. Left back and midfield are the two areas just now that people are debating about who should start, whether it be Alex Faye or Greg Taylor. And then we've had a couple of choices in central midfield with Engels and McCowan, Bernardo, Hatate. Obviously, McCowan's cup tied for this particular game, but how do you see those two areas of the pitch for us on Sunday?
It's such an interesting debate, Paul. Greg Taylor has been a tremendous servant for Celtic, and often in these big games he has played extremely well. So there is a historical bias that you can place to make an argument for Taylor to start based on how well he's played in the fixture, how well he has done under Brendan Rodgers. But he was very, very poor on Tuesday against Zagreb, and he's been inconsistent this year. I think if Clement was to go with Sterling at right back and play Tavernier further up the pitch as a bit of a curveball, I personally would like to see Valle play because of his recovery speed. I think speed wise he has a much better recovery than Taylor, and I think technically he's just a little bit better than Taylor as a footballer. That's not to say that Greg has not done a great job. So if it was me, I would like him to play Valle. Also want to see what the kid's got, right? He didn't play well at Pataudry, but nobody did. The conditions did not
Horrible
allow
game.
for a cohesive game for either side. So I'm not going to hold that against him, but I think he should start Valle. And that's personally what I would like to see happen. And then you juxtapose that with the middle of the park, and you've got just an equally fascinating conundrum. I mentioned it. Hatate was poor. I thought Engels actually played quite well when he came on in the game, Paul. And again, I'm not going to tell people what they should or shouldn't say in terms of their opinions, but everyone just needs to take a deep breath. Engels is 21 years old. He's come away from Europe. He's living in a brand new country. He's still integrating. I do not doubt for 1 second that this young man is going to turn out to be a tremendous footballer. So I let's just park the emotion around the value of the player and everything else. His form has not been consistent and has not been good enough. So McGregor and Bernardo start hands down. No questions. Bernardo has been tremendous. And I would say he probably waited longer than he should have done to get in the team, Paul. But really the debate will be, is it Engels or Hatate? Now, Hatate in this fixture, again, has been generally a very good performer. Yes, he's had some off games. I totally agree. But there is just generally something about the way he plays against Rangers in cup games. Like if I go back to the 2-1 League Cup final under Ange, he had a huge role in both the goals. And he has that capability. And on the wider pitch, with a little more time and space, he can really, really hurt any team with his ability to pick a pass. If Brendan decides to play Engels, I will not be frustrated. I won't be disappointed because you could make a very strong argument that Hatate was very poor and has probably been poor in the last handful of games. So therefore, he could come out the team. The rest of the team completely picks itself. AJ sounds like he's going to be fine. And the spine of the team is going to be there. I've heard discussions on some of other Celtic channels that maybe Ida should start over Kyogo. Zero chance.
That's a big call.
Zero chance.
Given Kyogo's record in this fixture.
Correct. In this fixture and in cup finals and in semi-finals, he has been a Rangers scalper. And he is a big game player. I felt for him on Tuesday night, Paul, just to quickly, make that comment. I watched the game back. The number of times he made a run and nobody looked to make that pass over the top through the channel. He was a cut, frustrated figure, and I don't blame him.
Something I noticed at the game actually was, I don't know if this was picked up on the television, but when his number came up to go off, he was absolutely furious. he kind of kicked the turf, and then he just looked so infuriated by it. He was still fine when he came off, and he went and acknowledged Brendan Rodgers and his teammates on the bench, but he was really frustrated and unhappy about having it come off, which probably tells you the story of how he felt it went and how wasteful we were going forward.
Exactly. Yeah, totally agree, Paul. So I think really the two decisions on our side are Valle, Taylor, Engels, or Hatate. I think the rest of the team completely picks itself. I'm sad for McCowan that he doesn't get a chance to feature in this game.
He's been good. Really
he's
good.
been tremendous, like absolutely tremendous, and that is £1 million extremely well spent.
Very well spent. Yeah,
Really
yeah,
well.
absolutely. I agree. I'm sure there'll be plenty more cup finals for Luke McCowan in his time at Celtic. Anyway, Chris, one of the hallmarks this season for us has been how well we started games. I think there's a long period from the start of the season where we were really blowing teams away with how we were starting games. That's maybe just dipped in the last couple of weeks. If you think about how we started at Tynecastle, the way we started against Hibs, obviously Bruges was a different game, and they were set up very well, and their sort of shape and press restricted us in that first half. But this game is all about how well we start it. Can you take control? Can you get the early momentum? And the power of the first goal in this fixture is huge. So on Sunday, we've got to make sure that we're the aggressor from minute one.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not have said that better myself, Paul. And I suspect that that will be the message ringing in the players' ears when they go down the tunnel and take the field. We need to play our game. We obviously, as Brendan always says, you respect the opponent. Nobody on this channel has a love for Rangers Football Club, not even close. But there's no doubt that they do have some pieces that if we're off our game, that they can hurt us. But I said it earlier, and I'll double down on it. If our best team shows up, we have the quality and we have the ability to hurt them in so many more ways than they do of us. But yes, absolutely. First 15, 20 minutes is going to be absolutely crucial. And if even if we don't get the early goal, or say we even go behind, you mentioned it earlier, Paul, and I wholeheartedly agree. The mentality of this team is not something I worry about. I don't feel like they would panic in that situation. Whereas I think the psychology on the opposite is that if we do get the early goal, is that is going to be a significant psychological problem for Rangers, just because of how these fixtures have gone over the last 2.5 years, so to speak. So really looking forward to the game. It's very intriguing, because I think we're in a very different place than we were 4 weeks ago in terms of how most supporters are probably looking at the game. We're obviously very confident that we can win, and I don't differ from that opinion, Paul. But I think it's going to be a very tight, very close game, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
Yeah, just briefly then before we finish, it's always sweet to win these derbies. I think this one would be particularly sweet, given that by Rangers' own measure, it would make us the most successful football club in the world. The last question is how do you see it going? How do you think it'll play out?
Well, I'm not going to veer from my opinion. I think it's going to be 2-1 to Celtic. I do think it will be a tightly contested game. There's probably no doubt that we'll control the bulk of the possession, but there are going to be periods, Paul, in the game where Rangers will have their moments. We're going to have to defend. I mean, like you said, in the game at Parkhead, we went on to win that game 3-0, and we were by far the better team. But for the first 10 to 15 minutes, like you said, Rangers pressed us pretty good. And if they're looking at a blueprint for how to have any success in the game, they should look at how Bruges approached the game. And I'll give Hibs credit. They're the best Scottish Premier League team I've seen at Celtic Park this year in terms of their willingness to get after Celtic. We made mistakes in our shape, particularly Liam Scales over pressing the ball and leaving gaps for Hibs to play in behind. But Hibs were able to play through the mistakes that we made and actually execute to give themselves significant opportunities. And that must be the first time, I think, since maybe Fraser Forster in a league game that the goalkeeper for Celtic was the man of the match in Kasper Schmeichel. That's the only other thing I would say, Paul, is if Rangers even do have those periods, you have the X factor in goal with Kasper, and we have a significant spine to go through the team. So I'll go 2-1 Celtic. Hope everybody enjoys the day and look forward to the Celtic Fans TV content post-match, and hopefully we're celebrating another trophy.
Absolutely, let's hope so. That's it for the preview show. Like this video, comment with your own thoughts on the game below. I'll be back tomorrow with the starting 11 prediction. Thank you for joining us.